Today's video is going to be showing you how to use the Autumn Wishes and Wishing You Joy stamp and stencil set from Gina Designs and Thermoweb. Hi everyone and welcome back. This is Mindy Eggen. We are going to start by taking a look at the Autumn Wishes stamp set, stencil, and the coordinating dies. So this is a large 6x8 stamp set with the trees, and you can either stamp the leaves onto the trees, or there is a coordinating stencil that you can use by either ink blending the leaves on or using Glitz Glitter Gel. And I'll show you how to be doing all of this. There's the leaves for I'm calling it the bushy tree on the stamp set, and then there is a coordinating one on the stencil. And then for the taller, skinnier tree, you can either line it up with the stencil or use that coordinating stamp set. I'm going to start by stamping out my trees. So I'm taking both of those tree images, lining them up onto my white cardstock in my MISTI stamping tool, and then I'm going to ink it up with honey mustard ink from Gina Designs. I found that this is actually a really great ink for stamping trees. So once I have those both inked up and stamped down, now before I clean them, I'm going to bring in chocolate truffle ink with a mini sponge dauber. So I'm just going to ink up that sponge dauber, and I'm applying ink to the very edges of the trees. So right on each side, just lightly dabbing that on both of those. This is going to give our tree some dimension. It'll add some shadow areas to it and make that middle piece a little bit lighter. So you just want to lightly dab. You don't want to go too hard, otherwise it's going to be a significant line. We want it to kind of fade into that honey mustard underneath. Then I just stamped that down, and I'll bring this in closer so you can see it looks really great in person. Really adds some dimension and character to your trees. Since I already have my stamps aligned on my MISTI tool and my ink's already out, I do like to go ahead and stamp a couple extra ones. So I just flipped my cardstock, stamped 2 more trees, and then I'll repeat that same process of just dabbing that darker ink on the very edges up into the branches just a little bit. You could even repeat this a second time to really deepen those shadow areas on the trees. So I went back in just a little bit just to try and deepen that up. So now here's just a look at the stamp set. You could just stamp those leaves on the trees. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using some of the Glitz Glitter Gel from Gina Designs and Thermoweb. I'm going to start by die cutting my trees first. I found this to be a lot easier when trying to line up my stencil. So I'm looking at the trunk of the tree when I'm lining this die up because we don't have the leaves in there yet. So I'm just making sure that those trunks are lined up, held them in place with purple tape, and ran them through my die cut machine. Now don't throw away your negative piece. We're going to be using that. That is a very helpful tool when we're going to be lining up these leaves. Whenever you're using those stamp and stencil sets, using that negative piece is really helpful. So I lined my trees back into their spaces on that negative piece and held them in place with the purple tape. And we are going to be using Pumpkin Spice and Holiday Pine, which are 2 brand new colors. And I'm also going to be bringing in some gold Glitz Glitter Gel. Now here I went ahead and lined up the leaves. I placed it just inside of that die cut line, held that stencil down with some purple tape. You could spray it with pixie spray, but I really didn't see the need to. This worked just fine. And then I also took some of Gina's Masking Magic and placed that down below the trunk of the tree. That way I didn't risk getting my Glitz Glitter Gel into areas I didn't want it to. So I'm starting off with the pumpkin spice, and I'm going to spread this over my leaves on my tree here. You don't need a lot. A little goes a long way, especially in these smaller areas. Now the pumpkin spice is a great kind of a burnt orange. It's gorgeous for fall leaves. So once I spread that pumpkin spice over my leaves, I'm going to wipe off my palette knife with a baby wipe. And I'm going to bring in the gold Glitz Glitter Gel. I'm wiping this off in between because I didn't want to contaminate my gold. And then I'm just dabbing that gold in areas, not covering the entire thing, just adding it here and there, kind of giving it a little bit of a swipe to spread that out. Then I'll remove that masking magic, and I'm holding the stencil down with my fingers so I don't move it or it doesn't shift. And then once I remove that purple tape, I can carefully peel that away. And I will clean this off really quick with a baby wipe. You could also take it to your sink and rinse it off, and then just gently kind of push that tree backwards. That purple tape is such a nice low tack tape that I can just kind of pop that right out. And I'll give you a close look here. Look how gorgeous those leaves look when it's two-toned like that. This is such a great combination for fall leaves. I'm going to set this one off on the side to dry. Being that we don't have a lot on here, these really don't take too long. I'd say maybe about 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so to let them dry. And I'm going to do the exact same tree the same way I had using the pumpkin spice and the gold Glitz Glitter Gel. And I love doing these kind of ombre or these kind of mix of the color tones. You could do this with any one of the colors, and I'm actually going to show you another one here shortly. So once I scraped off the pumpkin spice, wiped off my palette knife, and then bringing in that gold and just tapping it into the areas, making sure I'm holding down my stencil really well, removing that and popping it out, and then we have our second tree that we'll put off on the side to dry. Now I'm going to work on my second tree, which is kind of the taller, skinny tree, and this time I'm going to use that holiday pine, which is a really nice kind of deep green, or it's like a true green. And I'm going to mask off a few more areas on here because there are different stencil designs around it, and I don't want to get that Glitz Glitter Gel in there. So I'll bring in that holiday pine, cover the entire area there of the leaves, scraping off any excess. And I'm going to combine it with the gold, and this is also a great combination. It kind of gives that darker, lighter effect for the trees, kind of like the sun shining down on it and catching some shimmer there. You can see I'm holding that down really well and just pop that off and lightly pushing that back through our negative piece. And then we have the green and gold leaves. Like I said, these are so pretty mixed together. Now while my trees are drying, I'm going to go ahead and work on my backgrounds. My first card, I'm starting with some ink blending using Distress Oxides and my Picket Fence Studios Life-Changing Blender brushes. I have 3 brushes there. I have one with some washi tape, red, orange, and yellow, so I know which one is which. And I'm starting off with a piece of cardstock that measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. This is Gina K Designs Layering White cardstock. And I'm starting off with Wild Honey. And I'm bringing in the blender brush that has my yellow washi tape on it so I know which one it is. And I'm just applying a very light pressure, about 3/4 of the way down. I'm lightly doing this. I don't want to go all the way to the bottom. I want to leave that white. And then my second color is going to be Ripe Persimmon. And same thing, I'm just doing a really light pressure, adding a line of color, and then bringing in the Fired Brick. And I like to hold my blending brushes at the top, kind of the head of the brush. I feel that gives me more control over the pressure. And then I'll just continue to go back and forth to blend those lines together. I want a smooth transition between the 2 colors, so I do go back and forth a lot, kind of layering up those colors until I'm happy with the blend. Once I have those colors blended the way I want, and I have my craft mat cleaned up, I'm going to take some clear water in a spritz bottle and just mist that over my cardstock. This is going to lift up some of that ink and leave the white spots there. And then I just dab that up with a paper towel. Now I'm going to add my sentiment. This is also off of the Autumn Wishes stamp set, and I'm lining that up in the corner of my card at the bottom using Gina K Designs Obsidian Black ink, and this is a beautiful black. Then I'll take some foam squares, add them to the back of my tree, and I'm just going to add that to the front of my card, and this one will be finished, and we'll work on the background for our next card. I'm starting off with a piece of coral reef cardstock measuring 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'll be using the thick brush stencil from Gina K Designs. I really thought this matched well with my trees, and I'm going to just ink blend on some tomato soup ink using my blender brush. I'm not really worried about how heavy or how light this is. I just wanted to add a subtle background to my card. So just going over that entire area. Now this stencil I had previously sprayed with pixie spray, so it was still sticky on the back. That's why you're not seeing any purple tape on it, is I do have that pixie spray back there. Then I'll just carefully remove that stencil, and I can just rinse that stencil off in the sink. Here I did go ahead and trim that stenciled panel down. Now that is trimmed down to 2 1/4 by 3 1/2. I'm going to have a coral reef cardstock base that is measured 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The white cardstock, which is the heavyweight cardstock from Gina K Designs, is 4 3/4 by 3 1/2. And then I'm adding my small panel in the middle. And like I said, that's measuring at 2 1/4 by 3 1/2. Then I'm just adding foam squares to the back of my tree, and I'll add that to the middle of my stenciled piece. And off screen, I did go ahead and stamp a sentiment. That sentiment is actually from the Mini Hugs stamp set. I had heat embossed that with gold embossing powder onto chocolate truffle cardstock. And I'm just layering that with foam squares. I actually have 2 layers of foam squares on there. And I'll just place that right over the middle of my tree trunk. Now that finishes up my second card, and I do have a third one to share with you. Unfortunately, I didn't catch it on camera, but this one is a super simple card that you can do, and this was one of the other trees that I had created. So this is using the Jelly Bean Green cardstock, and I took the Autumn Wishes sentiment and just stamped that at an angle throughout the background of that cardstock. Those were 3 cards created with the Autumn Wishes stamp and stencil set, and now we are going to move on to using the Wishing You Joy stamp and stencil set. We will take a quick look at the stamp set. This is another 6 by 8 stamp set. You can decorate flowers or the ornaments. There's different designs you can add to your ornament, and the stencil that coordinates with that. There's also a set of matching dies as well. So I'm starting off with the ornament, and I'm lining that up with my MISTI tool. Now I apologize, mine is discolored only because I used it a lot. So it is a little discolored. I'm starting off by stamping my first ornament in Jelly Bean Green ink. I shifted my cardstock over, and I stamped my second ornament in the Raging Red Electro Pop ink. Then I'll use the coordinating die to die cut these out. And this is another one where, for me personally, it worked better to stamp the top of the ornament afterwards. So I saved my negative piece, and I'm popping my ornaments back in there, just holding them in place with some purple tape. And I'm going to line up one of the designs of the ornaments. There are a couple different ones you can do on here. I really liked this swirl design. So just holding that in place with the purple tape, you can see I did mask off the top portion where that hanger is going to go. I didn't want to get the Glitz Glitter Gel on there. So for this one, on the Jelly Bean Green ornament that I stamped out, I'm applying some of the Holiday Pine Glitz Glitter Gel. These are great. I love this tone-on-tone look. And then I'll remove my mask and my purple tape, carefully peel that up, and then I can just pop that out the back. And we have this gorgeous ornament that just sparkles. I love these 2 greens together. So then once I cleaned my stencil off, I'm going to do the same thing for the red. So just applying that mask at the very top. It's easier to stamp that ornament topper when you don't have that Glitz Glitter Gel there. That was my personal preference, what I found the easiest. Now for my red ornament, I'm going to use the gold Glitz Glitter Gel. I love that Raging Red for the ornaments. It is such a bright red. It is just perfect for Christmas colors. While I let those dry, I'm going to work on my background. And for the background, I'm going to be using the snowflake design off of that coordinating stencil. I'm also going to be applying this to powder blue cardstock, and I do have this at 4¼ by 5½. I do end up trimming it down, but I like to start bigger because I can always trim things down. I can't add cardstock back to it. And I'm applying the powder blue ink with a blending brush. So just going all over those snowflakes, making sure they're covered nice and even. Once I have that side done, I'm going to remove that stencil and line it up on the other side to have a completed piece. It may not line up completely perfect, but I thought it worked out really well. This is another instance where if you would prefer to spray the back of the stencil with the pixie spray, that definitely helps. I was pretty confident that the purple tape would hold this for just this little bit of ink blending that I needed to do. Once that was done, I did trim that panel down to 3¼ by 4½, and then just taking that powder blue ink and going around those outer edges. Now this is where I thought it was helpful to have these ornaments die cut first. I'm using one of the small comfort blocks that Gina Designs carries, and I attached that ornament topper, and I'm going to stamp it on there with the slate ink. And I just thought that was a lot easier than trying to figure out where it was going to die cut. And since I masked off that area, I don't have to worry about stamping on top of Glitz Glitter Gel. Now I did off screen go ahead and stamp a sentiment down in the bottom corner using the obsidian ink. And I lined up about where I wanted my ornaments to go, and using a T-square ruler and a black pen, I'm just drawing in some lines like my ornaments would be hanging down. Now this is not the best pen that I own. I could not find a decent fine tip marker, so this one just kind of did the job, and I traced over the lines a little bit. And the green ornament, I did go ahead and attach straight down onto the cardstock with some Connect glue. And the red ornament, I'm adding some foam squares just to give that a little bit dimension. I did frame this with white cardstock that measures 3¾ by 5 inches. And I attached it to a card base made from the powder blue cardstock 4¼ by 5½. I will have all the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. This is also part of a blog hop that's going on right now, so if you're watching this currently, be sure to head over there and check out the blog hop. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.